as we come together on this fourth day of January of the new year 2004. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. Thank you, James Stephen Terrell, for being with us from your hometown, Washington, D.C. Wow, what a hometown, huh? And surrounding us in our beloved Cultural Arts Center with this exquisite exhibit. The color is exhilarating, is it not? Bringing to us your abstract and realistic paintings. James received his high school diploma from Gonzaga College High School. He received the Bachelor of Fine Arts from Howard University, a Master of Fine Arts from Parsons School of Design, and the Master of Divinity degree from the Union Theological Seminary, with a concentration on theology and the fine arts. While attending Union Theological Seminary, he pursued fine arts painting elective courses at Columbia University. James is the assistant pastor of the historic Second Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. He has taught art for over 15 years in Washington, D.C.'s public schools and the D.C. public charter schools. James has exhibited his art all over the country and has had multiple shows, including exhibiting in art museums, including the Smithsonian, Anacostia Community Museum, and the Howard University Gallery of Fine Arts. James demonstrates the advancements of color theory. Are we not surrounded by color, huh? As approached by his art educational experiences from Howard University and the Parsons School of Design. James shares that his art springs from a wide array of influences, including quilt design, stained glass window techniques, and German painter Joseph Albers' color blocking. James's dynamic and colorfully saturated paintings project the movement of life and the vibration of energy, moving between abstraction and realism, electric color and interactions, and geometric patterning. James' aim is to contemplate and document our humanity and spirituality in these singularly turbulent times when we may be bewildered, befuddled, dizzy with thoughts of anxiety. James shares that a kaleidoscope addresses these feelings that we all encounter, despite race, color, or creed. James, your contemplation and creation of beauty through your painting is truly a gift to us. So take it away and celebrate this new year with us, and bring your beautiful wife and children up here and introduce them to us. Zudeka, come. The children gonna join you? They look a little shy, huh? All right. Tell us how you created the title.
Oh, okay.
Kaleidoscope.
Hi, my name is Sudeka Nzinga Terrell, and I am his wife. And we brought two of our three kids. So this is Ziomara, who's a singer, and JP, who is also an artist, and critiques us on our work quite harshly and quite often. I came up with the title for this exhibition because I felt like some of the works reminded me of kaleidoscopes when you look through them and you're like spinning them around in the ways that the colors fall, particularly some of the ones that are a little bit more shapely, and they're all figurative, but some of them come across, I think, a little bit less figurative. But I also felt like there was a kind of suspension of time and reality and space during the pandemic, particularly for us, because it was kind of an overnight, like, everything's going to shut down for 2 weeks rather suddenly. And then it was like everything just shut down and has been shut down forever since. And so it was kind of a difficult scenario for us that actually ended up working out really well to, one day he went to work and then they called him and said, don't come back. And it was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it was great for me because I was at the time a stay-at-home mom with very small kids, and that's very stressful. And so it was nice to have somebody suddenly be home with me who could help with these kids. But it really kind of shifted a dynamic in our house. And so so I think that the discombobulation or like the uncomfortable shifts and then trying to figure out how to lean back into the comfortable and the idea of like, well, what is new normal and what does that mean for us and what does that look like? And we have not returned to the way that life was previously, and that's great. He works from home now still. And so I got to watch him create all of these works, and it was one of the first times probably for him in years that he had time to just create art and focus on art and focus on the emotions that the art brings up. So.
Thank you. And did you design the glasses that you have? Because it seems to match one of these paintings. Oh, they're beautiful.
I did not, but for those people who like glasses, Z Lowell and both you me online buy all kinds of like really cool frames, and they put your prescriptions in for you, or you can take them to like Costco or something and put your prescriptions in. So I have a bunch of I have probably 30 pairs of glasses now. Switching up to match outfits.
Wonderful. How creative. Thank you, Judeka. Thank you. Are you telling us how much fun life is, huh? Well, James, take it away.
How do you want to go about this? You're going to just stay right at the microphone?
I'll walk around too.
Because you've got your,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
All right, can you hear me? Yeah. My name is James Terrell, and thank you all for coming out today. I really appreciate that. It's nice to see a nice crowd of people to come hear me speak about the work. Like she said, I'm from Washington, D.C., born and raised. My parents are actually from Akron, Ohio. So I've been to Akron growing up. Every summer we would go to Akron to see my grandparents. All summer they would drop us off and then head back to D.C., pick us up right before school started, bring us back to D.C. So the drive up was very nostalgic. This group of work, as my wife said, came out of the whole pandemic. First, after going to college, getting my first degree in the bachelor's at Howard University, I realized that I wanted to find out how can I support myself off my artwork in this day and time? How do you live off of your art? How can you buy a house if you're an artist off your artwork? And so when I graduated from Howard, I said I need to find a job because my art wasn't selling that much at the time. So I went to apply to teach art at a school in DC called McFarland. I was there for 6 months and realized that I did not want to be a teacher at this time. So I applied to every school I could in New York City, and I got into Parsons. And so I packed up, told my parents I was leaving to go to New York. They did not want me to go. My dad was animate about me not going to New York or about me pursuing art, but I said, I'm going. And so he called his brother, who was a pastor in Newark, and said, can my son live with you until he gets on his feet? And so my uncle, Lloyd, who also had 4 kids, we were all the same age, but they were in college in different states. So I moved up to his house, and I would commute myself back and forth to New York to go to classes, going to Parsons. And during that time period, that's when 9/11 hit. And one day I was sitting at home. I woke up late. I was supposed to be in school. I realized I didn't want to go to school that day. Stayed in, news came on, and that's that time that towers had fallen. And I was like, wow, I don't want to be in New York anymore. So after I got through school, I stayed there for a couple more years. I had a band, and we did a lot of music around New York City. I played guitar, and I'm also a singer-songwriter, more like rock and blues type stuff. And so we played around New York for a while, and then I realized, let me go back home to DC after I finished Union Theological Seminary. So I moved back to DC, began teaching again. I was doing a bunch of art shows. I was selling a lot of work. But I realized that I got very comfortable in my life, going to work every day. I was teaching, going home, get up, teach, go home, go to bed. Then I met my wife. Then we had 3 kids. And so my art started to decline. I wasn't really showing work, producing that much work. But then one day, the pandemic hit. Everything shut down. When everything shut down, my wife came to me and said, you need to use this time period to get back into your art and document what's going on during these times. And I was like, wow, I never thought about that. Because usually when I did work, I would work at my school in my classroom, because my classroom was huge, a huge art room. So then I began to start to work on this series of work, but I didn't realize that being home is different when you have 3 kids and a dog. And I like to work on the floor. Big mistake. So a number of these pictures had to be fixed, touched up, because I'm on the floor working, and the kids may run through the room, kick over some paint, and it splashes all over the paint, and I got to go back and fix it piece by piece. So I had a more appreciation of how do I produce this series of work. And I was more, I guess I was more in touch with how do I create this work with my family in this one house. And we couldn't go, it was nowhere to go. We're there every day, all day. So I began to start working on the wall. I'll put the stuff on the wall and begin to do it piece by piece. And that worked out better. And so during that time, I started to think about who were my influences in art when I was going to Parsons and Howard. I loved how he broke up the space in his artwork. And when I was in school, my art teacher always told me, how do you use your work? How do you compete with the TV? How do you compete with the internet? How do you compete with the cell phones? How do you get people's attention spans to last longer than 5 seconds when you look at a painting? And so I began to try to figure out, how can I get people to want to look at the work and be invested, put their time into it, have their brain and eyes look at it and begin to have images pop out, and how do you pull people into your artwork? And so I began to look at artists like Modrian and say, how can I add a figure into an image like this? So when I paint, I'll draw the image out first, and then I'll go back and overlay the pattern. And then I'll have all the paint that I have, around me. And I will go back and then piece it in piece by piece. So the image is planned out, but the color is not planned out at all. The color plays off each other. So I'll move from the top to the bottom to the side until everything is balanced out. I was really into the color theorist, Eitan, and I liked how his colors, how he put colors together, and how wherever you place colors, the colors you place them, the different interactions occur with the eye and the brain. And I was trying to play with that, with these different images here. I was also into Joseph Albers as well, and how his interaction and use of colors, and how colors play off each other's. Depending on what colors beside each other, it'll either push a color forward or pull it back.
Mix your own colors?
These colors are pretty much flat. They're not mixed at all. One thing I learned in school is that when the colors are not mixed, they're brighter and they're bolder. So I didn't want to mix the colors as much. So these are all pretty much all flat. This piece is one piece on this side here. As you can see to your right-hand side, it's how it started off. And then the colors were overlaid later. Going to Howard University, I had an artist who was a teacher there named Jeff Donaldson. He was from a group called Afrocobra. Afrocobra was an art group which consists of about 10 other artists, and they were from Chicago. And they documented the times of the 60s in Chicago and in the US. And I liked his use of colors and patterns, and I was trying to figure out how I can also use these patterns and figures and integrate them both together in my work. Trying to capture movement, on the picture plane, on the 2D plane, how do you capture movement? So the more colors you place together, your eye begins to think things are moving. It's like an optical illusion. And I was trying to capture that.
How many hours would it take to do this?
Oh, this would take some time. But the fact of the matter is, being the fact that I was not working at school, I could sit and work on my artwork. So I would just work on art all day while I was at home. And when school did open back up, they made my art class virtual. And so I could still work from home and teach my class at the same time sometimes. And I had more time to spend on creating my artwork. So I was researching Jeff Donaldson, and I really liked his color pattern and how he captured movement. And it reminded me of jazz music. And it's like visual jazz. And when I was at Parsons, a bunch of my friends were jazz musicians. We would always have these debates and talking about how art and music are similar, because in art you have the color wheel, and then in music you have the cycle of fourths and the cycle of fifths, and how the different tones in music are like the different tones of art, and we're trying to connect the two together. So this piece here is this piece over here. And it was funny because in my house, I have a whole collection of African masks on my wall in the house. And at this time, I think this mask was not on the wall at the moment. And so it was funny because my daughter, Ziamara, was trying to contemplate what is a face mask. So one day I said, I'm going out. I need to get some air. And she ran to me and said, Daddy, don't forget your face mask. And I thought that was brilliant, how her concept of what, the face mask during the pandemic. I said, I got to capture this. I took a picture of it real quick. I ran downstairs to go out the house, and then my son is by the front door with another mask on. I said, I got to capture this too. So I took the picture real quick. Then I put them together. I said, I got to paint this somehow. So then I began to draw it out. And I overlaid the pattern over top of the two images. And then I began to color it in piece by piece. And that's the piece here.
Do you dream about those at night?
Actually, no, I don't really dream about my artwork.
Everybody hear that question? Inga, let's say it nice and loud.
I asked if he dreams about those at night. Seriously.
I do have very vivid dreams, but I don't dream about the art I'm producing. I'll dream about other artwork. I'll see other artwork that haven't made yet, or that I would like to make. But I've never actually dreamed about the pieces that I have up here. Yes?
You say you don't plan out your colors in advance. Are you just applying them to the canvas, stepping back, seeing what you like, and or are you mixing up a palette on the side and saying, okay, this combination is gonna...
Oh, no, the first one, what you said. One thing my teacher taught me at school was like, sometimes we as artists get in the way of our own artwork. We don't listen to our art. We'd like to tell the art where it needs to go, and sometimes you need to step back and let the art tell you where it wants to go. So that's what I do. I'll put some paint somewhere, step back, look at it, and then if I put a color here, then I'll start to put a color here. Then I'll go over here and keep going back and forth so it's balanced out. It's not top heavy or too heavy on the side. Because using so many colors, I want to make sure that it's still balanced out. And the same thing with jazz music. One of my friends said, one thing about jazz that you can play any note you want to play in a scale as long as you can resolve those notes back. And the same thing with music. With art, you can use any color as long as you can balance it out. I was really into Sonia Delaney, her work. That piece inspired the piece over here with the lady in the hat. And this represents the time of the pandemic when me and my wife were all dressed up to go out somewhere, and then everything shut down. We couldn't leave the house for months, up to a year. And this is the connection between her work, Delaney, and my work, and the use of the circles. This piece is on the back wall on the side. This was inspired by the artist Dali, the surrealism. I really liked his work growing up, and I wanted to capture it, but still using flat colors, but giving a 3D effect by not having to shade it. So I started looking at different approaches of how to add the circles. That's how it came out first. And I said, well, how can I take this a little bit further? And I added the lines to it. Then I looked back at his work and tried to match up the use of the circles and the spheres. I was really inspired by Picasso's work as well, his abstract work. And this piece inspired the piece over here. This is called The Shining. I don't know if you guys saw the movie The Shining a long time ago. So that's how I felt during the pandemic. You're stuck in the house with your family, you can't go anywhere. Everything starts to collide to each other. We all start to merge together. And he's also wearing the Harlequin pattern, just like a joke that we're all stuck in the house during this time. This is how it started off, with just a sketch. Then added the colors to it. And that's how it ended up. I'm also really influenced by stained glass windows in my work as well. My dad's a pastor in DC, and he's been a pastor for about 30 years. But before that, he was an assistant pastor for about 20 years. So I've been traveling with him, going to churches, and I always love to see the stained glass windows. So every time I would go to a church service with him at a different church, I would be enamored by the different approaches to stained glass windows. And I like the stained glass windows made by the artist Tiffany. And he has a lot of his work is in DC at just old churches. So I was trying to capture also the blocking of the images that I would see in the stained glass windows. I also liked Franklin Lloyd Wright's work as well. It was very influential on my approach to breaking down the spaces, just not having the image in it. I was really also into the work of Victor Vasily, who was an opt artist in the 60s. It was him and Bridget Riley who were at the forefront of the whole optical illusion art and making things seem like they're moving even though they're not, and how the eye and the brain play off each other with the colors and the contrasting colors, the warm and cool colors, and how they vibrate and make it seem like things are moving even though they're not. And this one really influenced a lot of the pieces that are on this side of the wall over here. This was another teacher of mine from DC, Akili Ron Anderson. He was part of also the Afro-Cobra group, and he had a bunch of stained glass windows he had designed for different churches and different schools around DC and US of A. I liked his approach to how he broke up the plane, and you still could see the hand in the middle. This piece was interesting. So this piece is in the back, all the way in the back. And so during the whole pandemic period, they had the whole different riots going on in the US, the whole George Floyd and the whole police brutality situations that were going on across the US. They were being televised. And so I drew the picture out of a father here, and he's holding his son with his hand over his son's heart, and he's breaking the chains, which are here. And you have hands up with the whole hands up, don't shoot. And you have the fist that have the chains around them, if you can see. And so I drew this picture out, and then one day I came home, and the kids had scribbled up all over it. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to fix this picture? Because one thing, if you're an artist, you know, if you draw with a Sharpie, it'll bleed through anything you have. It's hard to go over it. So that painting has layers and layers of paint on it, trying to conceal these different marks. If you look at it, you can see some of them coming through. But it showed their approach to what they were seeing too, and the whole anxiousness and the anxiety and just like scribbling over it. And I thought that was actually, seeing how they perceived the artwork was very interesting to me. So it added texture to the image. That's how it turned out. So my work was also influenced by Bridget Riley from the 60s. And she was really into the whole use of warm and cool colors, how they play off each other, and it gives it a movement of the optical art illusion approach. This piece was not in this series. I didn't bring it down, but this was based off the whole George Floyd incident, why he was arrested that day. And I didn't know this, but I did the research, and my wife and I were talking about, you know, how that even happened, or what happened, how did it even start. And it started from the fact that he had went to a store and bought something, and the person at the store thought the bill was counterfeit. That's how the whole situation emerged. And the guy who called the police said he wished he had never called the police. So I wanted to capture that situation. That's how it came out. This piece is Mother Nature. This was influenced by or inspired by my wife. Being that I was home now every day, I didn't notice that we have so many plants in the house. She collects plants, and we have so many plants that we don't have curtains because we have plants all over the windows everywhere. So this was a piece that was inspired by her.
And that's right there behind you.
Yes. Piece here. So it's a full figure. If you look at it long enough, you'll see the face and the hands holding the flowers, and she's wearing a dress as well. But if I was working at that time when I was doing this series, I would have never got this work done. It would not have been enough time at all to produce. This whole series took about like 8 months to create.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Those sketches look like they've evolved a little. How long does it take for you to get a sketch to where you're satisfied?
Oh, so I'll just draw it right out.
James, do you want to repeat that for us?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The sketches look very evolved. They look like it's finished and now it's going to be taken into the color phase. And I was wondering how many sketches and how long does it take to do that, to get a sketch to that point? Because I sketch and I got to sketch again, but that looks pretty much like that. And he answered it.
Yeah, so I'll just draw it straight out, and I'll just go with it. If I make a mistake, I leave the mistake in there. My teacher said if it wasn't meant to be there, you wouldn't have put it there. So I always like to just, if I do something, I just leave it and just build upon it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This piece is on the wall over here. This piece here. So it's inspired by this African mask. I forgot the name of the Bawami Society in Africa. And so it is a mask that deals with the past, present, and the future. And I was trying to capture that in this picture during the time period of the pandemic, looking at the past, looking at where we were at the time, and what does this mean for our future going forward. This piece is over here, also inspired by Bridget Riley. This piece is called Not Enough Answers, because during the pandemic, there were so many questions about what's going on, why is this happening, how did this start, what's going on, what's going to be in the future, and there was just not enough answers to all the questions that were being asked during that time period. So I was trying to capture that person thinking about what is really going on with this pandemic. This is how it started off, with a sketch, and then filling it in. I drew this when we were in New York. During the pandemic, we would take a lot of trips together, and my wife would always find these nice Airbnbs in New York, and we would always go there. And so this time I took my painting with me and worked on it while we were on our trip, just vacationing in New York, because we were tired of just being in the house in DC. We just wanted to get out and go somewhere. All right, so this piece is not in the show, but during the pandemic, I was talking to my dad a lot, and he said, I asked him, what happened to the quilts that your mother used to make for us? And then he invited me over to the house and pulled some out the attic. And so I started to reimagine these quilt patterns and started to also incorporate those into what I was drawing in my work. And so this piece was a Raggedy Ann doll that my grandmother had made for one of my sisters. And that was in his attic. He pulled it out. And then I made this picture out of it. But that one's not in this particular exhibit. Also, I really like the work of Kosama. She's a Japanese artist, and I love her use of polka dots and the use of her colors. And so I was trying to capture it in this particular piece here. This is how it turned out. But it's actually all the way down the hall. And I was trying to show the anxiety in the movement, and then also the circles of like the virus at the time. My work is really inspired a lot by geometric shapes as well in my pieces. And this piece is on the wall here. There was a very interesting show that came out on Netflix called Circle Triangles, or the Squid Game. I don't know if you saw that. Anybody saw the Squid Games? If you did see the Squid Games. So if you see the circles in the middle, you have the triangle, then you have the square, and the person in the middle. It's like a bullseye. So it's just like life. How do you survive life during this time period? How do you win the game? How do you play the game? And that TV show really inspired that particular piece. This piece is on the other wall here. And it's called God and the Devil. This sketch took some time to work out. Usually I don't keep going over and erasing stuff, but this one I erased and went over a lot for this piece.
Somebody asked me right before, which one is God and which one is the devil?
Okay. So this one is God on this side, and the devil's over here. He's the more flamboyant one with his hand out. Oops. What did I do? So this piece is really inspired by the pandemic. If you know the story of Job in the Bible, anybody know the story of Job and how one day God and the devil were talking, and God comes and the devil says, well, what about your friend Job? You think if I can touch him in certain ways, he'll still love you, respect you, and still want to follow you? Well, God says, well, you can do whatever you want to, just don't touch him. And so, as you know the story, the devil takes everything from Job, his family, his money, his mental health, his wife, and yet and still, he holds firm to his faith. And so I always thought this was also really a key to the pandemic. It was like one day God and the devil got together and said, if I put this virus out, will this change how people approach you and honor you? Will they still have their faith in you? I was trying to capture that particular aspect of that time period. This piece is the piece on this side. This piece here. And so one day I was on Facebook at home and I came across one of my friend's posts. And in the post, he was talking about how he was tired of being in the home because of this pandemic. So I immediately called him up and said, can I paint this picture of you? It really captures what we're going through right now. And he said, sure. So I drew it out first like this. And then I overlaid the pattern and began to fill it in step by step. So that's how it turned out. Now, I was really trying to capture movement in this particular piece. This piece is not in this show. It was sent to an embassy in Africa a couple months ago. But it's a couple, and it reminded me of me and my wife at the time during the pandemic, of how we were stuck in this house together, but yet a lot of folks broke up during that time period. They hadn't realized being with their partner every day, all day, what that actually meant. And so it actually brought us closer together, I thought, and we made it through it. And that's how it came out. This piece was about during the whole time period of the police brutality, and I was trying to capture how do you hold police accountable for their actions, all these mistakes that they're making about shooting these people in the back and doing these arrests. And so here was a piece here when it was completed. This is what it looks like. You can't really see it unless you really take some time and look at it. But that's what's underneath all the pattern is that image.
James, the design is so beautiful. How do you keep track of what you have done from side to side, from top to bottom? How do you do that?
That's a good question. I guess it's very therapeutic in an aspect because when you're working on art, you don't have time to think about anything else except what you're working on, I've noticed. So I'll be working on a piece of art, 8 hours passes, and I haven't thought about anything but that's what I'm doing.
And you keep track of what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And
Pattern overlay over that.
Yeah, it's coming up next.
yeah.
That was a pattern. Then I started to put the piece down, piece by piece. And that's the end result.
On that, it looks almost like you had circles and stripes, or is that like a?
Mm-hmm. Like a flag,
Into the flag? Okay.
American flag concept. So I was trying to mask the image because it's kind of hard to look at, police with a gun to himself as opposed to somebody else. So the colors, I think, balance out the underlying message.
Yeah, Yeah, I was gonna say, some of your underlying imagery is very evident, and this one seems more hidden. Are you kind of gauge how
Yeah.
much you want to reveal using those colors?
True. Yep.
Those pictures have to be really studied, because if you walk by, just look at them, it looks like just a color pattern. But if you stop and look, you find all the things you're pointing out to us.
This piece is on the wall. It's called The Last Supper. It's Jesus with his disciples. And this piece also represents the time period because everybody was coming out with the pandemic saying, well, if you don't get this shot, everybody's going to die. And 3 years later, the whole world didn't die. But at the time, no one knew what was going to happen. So it's like the Last Supper, last meal together with people.
I was looking at the dollar sign and wondering if that was the tax collector.
No, that was Judas. So
Oh,
he has
is
the
that
30
Judas?
pieces of silver
Oh,
around his
okay.
head. All right, so now, after I did this particular series, my wife said, why don't you use some paper and try to do collage your work and see how that comes up. So now I have a whole series which will be on display in Vermont in April. And it's the same concept, but now I'm using fabric and paper. So whenever we travel to a different state, my wife and I always run to the art store and see what kind of paper or paint they have, because each state has different things, I've noticed. And so we have bins and bins full of different fabrics and paints from all over the world. So this piece here is also from that series. Same concept with the overlaying of the pattern, but it's just fabric and paper now. That's how it comes out. So now I'm able to add more patterns, because trying to paint something like this would take years or months to do. So I'm glad she made the suggestion to go ahead and use the paper and the fabric along with the paint. And now I can create the work a lot quicker. Yes?
Your wife has really helped you with your art.
Oh, yeah. My wife is also,
Amazing.
she's also an amazing artist as well. She's very helpful when it comes, we talk about art all the time, and we always critique each other's artwork and give suggestions. We go back and forth.
She showed her work.
Oh, yeah, Zuleika? Got a question for you.
Yeah, when you show your work.
I thought we were looking at it now.
Here's another piece from that series.
You shared that quilts were part of your influence.
Going back, looking at, so I would go back and research different quilt patterns from different parts of the U.S. And I would integrate some of those patterns into the artwork as well. Because different parts of the U.S. have different approaches to quilt making, I've noticed. And I tried to add that in the work.
Well, it gives us more time to do that wonderful hat.
Yeah, my parents are really into fashion, and my mom has a whole collection of hats, has a whole room just full of hats, all kind of hats. And my dad has a whole collection of hats as well. But if you have any questions, let me know.
Where in your house can you fit something like that to paint?
Oh, I did it on the floor. Painted on the floor in the basement.
Keep your shades so sharp then. Yeah, I mean, that would be really tough.
Yeah, Well, at the time, well, my wife is now has moved has moved her studio in the basement, so I couldn't do that now. At the time, it was an open basement. Now it's full of all her supplies and stuff. So I couldn't do that now, but now I have a studio in DC, in an area called Georgetown. And it's just about half the size of this room. So now I've produced a lot more bigger pieces lately.
More than one piece at a time?
It depends on how big it is. If it's really big, then I'll be working on more than one at a time. If it's small, I just work on it till it's done.
Are you also able to work with your father at the Baptist church?
I preach on the second, fourth, and fifth Sundays.
Second, fourth, and fifth, that's a lot.
It is. Yeah, a lot going on, but it works out.
What do you think your painting does for your spirit that you bring to your preaching then?
Oh, it gives you time to reflect, gives you quiet time. It's more like a meditation. It's like a talk with yourself and with God as well, and with the artwork as well. So it's very therapeutic working on artwork like this because it's very meticulous. It takes time to actually put the colors down. And I'm always complaining to my wife about how long it takes to do it and how I'm tired of working on it. I'm not going to do it again. But then the next time it gets even more complex, and then it gets more complex.
Your wife mentioned that your lives changed, obviously, your work life, once the pandemic hit. Can you explain your day-to-day pre-pandemic and then your kind of day-to-day routine post-pandemic? And it sounds like that's evolved a bit.
Oh, yeah. So before, no. All right. So before, you get up in the morning, I get up around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Kids are still asleep. Wife still asleep. Run off to work. Teach there all day until about 4, leave school at 4, come home. So exhausted. See my kids for about a couple hours and then go to sleep and get up and do it again every day. And then when the pandemic hit, one day I woke up, didn't have to go anywhere. And I was like, wow. And I didn't realize how much time I had on my hands. I didn't realize how much time and effort my wife has to put in dealing with the kids every day and dealing with her own work as well. And she's also a professional artist as well. So having to raise kids, small kids at that time, they were, 2 and 3 day? About 2 and 3, or 2 and 4. And when I got home, I never realized what it took to manage a household. I had never even thought about it. And then when I got to the point where I was there to see it, I was like, wow, how do you do this every day? I thought my job was hard. But the kids I'll have a group of kids come in, then they leave out in 30 minutes. I got a new group. But having the same kid every day, all day, and having to entertain them and teach them, and I had a great more appreciation and respect for what she was doing.
Have you ever done any kind of other painting besides this?
Yes, before this, it wasn't any patterns included. It was just strictly an image, but it was more lines on the work. It wasn't broken down into patterns.
You didn't draw like
I didn't show any pieces.
landscapes or anything like that?
No, never did landscapes.
Portraits or
Well, these are more like, these are portraits, but they're not realistic, not realism, but yeah. I've never done realism before.
How large are your fabric pieces?
I have one piece that I'm working on now that is the size, that is bigger than this piece. And it's a family at a dinner table. And
Tom, you have a question?
I don't have a question so much as an observation. Given all of the artists who inspired different works, somehow you've managed to create an amazingly cohesive exhibition that is all your own. It boggles the mind.
thank you.
extraordinary.
Anyone that is your favorite?
I like the lady with the hat here, and then the God and the Devil piece. Those two of them, my favorite, out of this whole series.
What did you say your next series is?
It's all collage work. It's these images, but it's about 20 more of these pieces. So they range in size from, like this exhibit here, they're about the same kind of sizes. And it's called, the series now is called The Transcendence Beyond the Terrestrial Plane. And it deals with, trying to get outside of what you see every day. And we get so immersed in our cell phone, we don't take time to look around and see the sky, and look at the animals. And a lot of the patterns I have in these images have like different butterflies in them, and flowers, and trying to give people a moment to just take a breath and get away from the cell phone for a moment and just look around at the earth and what God has given us to look at and celebrate it.
I was wondering, where's your next exhibit going to be located?
It's called the Vermont Art Center, and it'll be up from April until July.
That's gonna be these 20 pieces that you're doing now?
These pieces, yeah, will be up there. But then this show here goes to New York, to a museum in the Niagara Falls area, and that opens up in March. It'll be up from March till September. Question, James? Go ahead.
What is it? What would you ask?
You might be just share yourself.
Last piece about?
Everybody hear that? Daddy, what was your last piece about?
The last piece in this exhibit? Or in where? This one? Oh, that's one. This one's called Father Time. It's a guy who's smoking a pipe right here with the smoke coming out. Yes.
I don't know if this got asked when I was away from at the desk, but in this picture around the corner, which one's God and which one's the devil? The one around the corner.
Oh, I'll show you. Let me see.
You already did.
It's on here.
Once we had that figured out, there wouldn't be any mysteries.
All right. Yeah. This is the devil here. He has the pinky ring on. He has more of a flair to himself.
There was a running debate here amongst the people who came in and looked at that, as to which was which.
It also depends on the person looking at it too. Pretty sure.
They're awful sharp. Oh, I had another question. So you went to Parsons, which I know that's design.
Perfect design.
Did you ever do any fashion designing or?
I took a course in it, but I took a course in fashion design, but I didn't stick with it. But I'd like to use the clothes in my work. So one day I may be able to get a fashion line with these pieces.
And James, you and the family are headed to drive back?
We're going to Philadelphia tomorrow. I have a show in Philadelphia tomorrow at the National Liberty Museum that opens tomorrow night. So we're going to leave here and go there, then go to DC. Drive. We drive a lot. And the kids love to see the landscape because it's so different being in the city. When they get out, see the mountains. Well, thank you all for having me here. I appreciate it.